Welcome back. I'm glad you could join us for Deathridge 100 Pop and Son on the Mortgage Mess Part 2. By way of review, the mortgage bubble did not blow itself, rather it was created on purpose by the gold man with big sacks and his prodigal sons, and the gold man with big sacks and his prodigal sons run the government and the banking industry. If you understand these 2 points, you have a complete foundation to understand the rest of the story about liar loans, robo-signers, the MERS database, mortgage-backed securities and the giant fraud perpetrated on we the sheeple of the United States of America.
He's up, Pop. I understand that the gold man with big sacks had a seminal influence on the mortgage mess, and that the gold man with big sacks trains very smart men and then installs them at higher levels throughout the government and the banking industry, and I understand that the gold man with big sacks goes behind closed doors and spills some of the content of his big sack into the drawers of the nincompoops that we elect to Congress, making Congress the biatch of the gold man with big sacks.
Exactly. Congress is the biatch of the gold man with big sacks and the banking industry is run by the prodigal sons of the gold man with big sacks. So if the gold man with big sacks sees an opportunity to rape the shit out of the American public, it needs only plan well and then have its biatches in Congress and its prodigal sons that run the banks and the regulatory agencies implement its dastardly plan. That is how the mortgage mess was created.
Pop, why would the gold man with big sacks want there to be a mortgage bubble?
Son. The bubbles are distortions of the free market economy in which resources chase a particular type of asset, progressively inflating the number of dollars it takes to control that asset over a period of time, beyond the utility and underlying value of that asset, until it dawns on the general public that the inflated value of the asset has become ridiculous and unsustainable, at which point the bubble in question, as all bubbles do, collapses.
Well, that is all fine and good, Pop, but I still do not understand why the gold man with big sacks would want to create a bubble.
Son, imagine that you had a crystal ball and could see which assets were going to go up in value over a given period of time.
That would be great. I would get my ass hip deep in the asset that was going to have a parabolic rise.
Precisely. So back in 2001, when that ragtag group of Saudis from Arabia took that full court shot hitting nothing but net and knocking down the World Trade Center towers, symbolically removing the center of trade from the United States and placing it in another country to be named at a later date, our economy was in deep trouble. Then Federal Reserve Chairman and resident psychopath Alan Greenspan lowered interest rates to 1%. Inflation was higher than 1%, so banks could borrow at a negative real interest rate, and they did.
Why did the psychopath former Fed Chairman Alan Greenspan lower interest rates to 1%?
The psychopath former Fed Alan Greenspan lowered interest rates to 1% because he was the lapdog of the gold man with big sacks, and the gold man with big sacks wanted his prodigal sons to be able to loan money to the sheeple.
Okay, so the psychopath former Fed Chair Alan Greenspan, lapdog to the gold man with big sacks, lowered interest rates to 1% so that the prodigal sons of the gold man with big sacks could borrow at negative real interest rates and lend that same money to the sheeple?
Yes, that is exactly what happened.
Okay, Pop, but the sheeple who borrow money from the prodigal sons of the gold man with big sacks chose by themselves to invest in real estate, right?
Yes, son. The sheeple, seeing that mortgage interest rates were so low, began to refinance their mortgages, getting lower payments, and even taking cash out to pay off bills and to fix up their homes.
Well, Pop, that seems like a perfectly rational thing to do.
Yes, it was a rational thing to do. In addition to letting people refinance their homes at lower monthly payments and consolidate debt and to fix up their properties, the lower interest rates allowed more and more people to qualify for a mortgage and to become homeowners. So the unintended consequence of 1% interest rates was a heating up of the mortgage market.
Well, Pop, it seems to me that the gold man with big sacks only had his lapdog Alan Greenspan lower interest rates so that his prodigal sons could loan money to the sheeple, but the sheeple decided to put that money into real estate, and the gold man with big sacks was as much a bystander to that event as any of us.
Yes, up to this point in our story, the gold man with big sacks simply created the environment in which his prodigal sons could make money by loaning to the sheeple. But remember, the gold man with big sacks is very smart, and he soon realized that the sheeple were hooked on this real estate idea. The gold man with big sacks, like a drug dealer, understood that in order to keep the sheeple focused on real estate, so that a bubble could form, and the gold man with big sacks could harvest the fruits of that bubble, the gold man with big sacks, would need to supply the drug. In the case of the real estate bubble, the drug was cheap money, not only for responsible borrowers, but for any Harry Dick who wanted a loan.
So the gold man with big sacks saw that there was the potential of a bubble in the real estate market, and understanding that this bubble or distortion in the market would allow the gold man with big sacks and his prodigal sons to make ginormous profits if that bubble were permitted to bloom, set out to fertilize and nurture the real estate bubble.
Yes, that is it exactly. The gold man with big sacks and his prodigal sons thought long and hard. In the end, they came up with a number of changes that would need to be made to the system in order to allow the real estate bubble to bloom, creating the environment in which the gold man with big sacks and his prodigal sons could sodomize the American people.
What changes did the gold man with big sacks make to the system to allow them to financially sodomize the American people?
Son, the changes the gold man with big sacks made to the system allowed the real estate bubble to form, and for the gold man with big sacks and his prodigal sons to make serious bank. Let's discuss changes to the systems the gold man with big sacks made on the next episode, right now. I need to go check the mail. I'm waiting for some American Silver Eagles to be delivered. You should buy some silver too, so we can crash the illegal short position of JP Morgan Chase. Chase this, biatch. Meet you back here in a few minutes to begin part 3 of Deathridge 100 Pop and Son on the mortgage mess.